Welcome back to Team O'Neill. I'm Wyatt. What we're going to look at today are a few criteria that you'd want to have in mind if you were trying to choose a good vehicle for hard use driving. There's a lot of classic cars out there, there's a lot of exotic cars and different vehicles that are all wonderful, and if you really like to work on cars and you get a lot of enjoyment out of wrenching on stuff and kind of that experience, that's great. The more people that are out there enjoying cars as a hobby, the better. But for the purpose of this video, we're looking at hard use driving. What vehicles are going to hold up on the track? What vehicles are you going to practice rally techniques with? What vehicles are you going to go out and be able to drive hard for a sustained period of time without having to end up in the garage so much? So let's take a look at the few criteria that it takes to make a real driver's car, kind of ignoring the marketing slogans and brand prejudices and country of origin and all that stuff. We definitely want to hear from you guys in the comments section, especially with specific years of vehicles, makes and models and that kind of thing and experiences that you've had. And let's dive right into how to choose the best cars for hard use driving. All right, so let's dive right into it. If you're looking for a vehicle that you can go out and drive hard, money's obviously going to be a factor. We're all familiar with the law of diminishing returns as far as cars. You've got your actual cost of the car to you, a new car, used car, whatever it might be, and then the actual quality, longevity, expected use of that vehicle. In cheaper cars, it's a pretty steep curve. At some point, it levels over, and then the diminishing returns part comes where a $100,000 car isn't $80,000 better than a $20,000 car. So if you're looking at something that you can drive hard, take to the track, maybe turn into a race car, something like that, this is the zone you want to be in. There's no point in being way out here somewhere. And kind of where does that exist? Here in America in 2020, for all intents and practical purposes, this right here is going to be somewhere, 5K, and this right here is going to be somewhere around 30K. And honestly, anything beyond that is not gonna be much better. We'll talk in a second about performance and some of the other factors that you're gonna be looking for. And realistically, for under 30K, you can have a fairly modern and reliable vehicle with excellent suspension and brakes, and you're gonna drive that vehicle with the appropriate mentality. No matter what your budget is, if you're in a $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 vehicle, you're going to drive that a little bit more cautiously, and parts are going to be a lot more expensive, and you're going to run into a lot more issues down the road. On the more affordable side of the spectrum, things under or around $5 grand, $7 grand, $10 grand, less than that, $2,000, $3,000. Again, if you're very mechanically useful and you enjoy doing that and you don't mind a vehicle that's going to need more maintenance more commonly, that's fine. But for the purpose of this video, we're specifically looking for those vehicles that you can take out and drive hard and put away dirty and get in the next morning and do it again for a sustained period of time. And anything beyond that is just unnecessary. If you have, massive disposable income, sure, go for it. If you really can drive those cars like they don't super matter to you that much. But just know they're not gonna be much better than a much more affordable option. And realistically, you might be better with, 4 of these cars than 1 of those cars. So really think of this as taking the millions of vehicles out in the world and putting them through a funnel of, different screens and filters to end up with the perfect product at the end, whatever that might be. And the first kind of filter that you got to put that through is, simply dollars. In motorsports, you'll often hear people say, if you can't afford to write it off, you can't afford to race it. And that holds pretty true when you're driving at the limit. So if you're really looking at driving hard, pick something that's definitely within your means and worst case, disposable. The second filter that you should have if you're looking at a vehicle for real performance driving is try to pick something relatively new. Again, if you're a tinkerer and you love working on stuff and those little troubles and problems that you have along the way excite you and give you an activity that you wouldn't otherwise have, that's wonderful. But just know, as soon as a vehicle leaves the factory, it starts to deteriorate. And we're not even talking about mileage and other people that have driven it. We're simply talking about the lifetime of the materials used to build that vehicle. Specifically all of the plastics and rubbers and little pieces and parts and, bimetallic corrosion between steel bolts and aluminum and rust and all this other stuff. When you get into a vehicle that's, say, 10 years old, all of those parts have seen some life. They've seen some wear. The rubber and the plastic's a little more brittle than it was. Some of the bolts are going to be stuck and frozen, and there's going to be a little bit of rust on some things. When you get into a vehicle that's, 20 years old, that's going to be significant. That's going to mean silly stuff is going to start going wrong. It's going to be window motors, it's going to be door handles, it's going to be door lock mechanisms and door seals, and belts and hoses are going to be dry cracked and dry rotted, and brake lines, and anything that's plastic or rubber that's seen any sun or salt or time just isn't going to be what it once was. So if you imagine yourself in a parking lot with all the cars in the world and you've got to pick one to go hot, don't pick one that's old. Simply for reliability's sake, anything over 20 years old, don't even bother. Again, there's a lot of amazing and wonderful cars that are more than 20 years old, and absolutely you should own them and you should collect them and treasure them and drive them gingerly on the weekends or meticulously rebuild the whole thing. But we're talking about just hopping in something and going hot, don't bother. If you get something in, this range, just know that it's got some age and it's on the way out the door a little bit. Here we are in, 2020. So this would be 2010 and this would be the year 2000. That's about what you're looking at right now. So anything 2000 to 2010 is probably fine, but just know that you're going to be replacing some of those parts that you wouldn't otherwise have to. If you get into something 2010 or newer, you're not going to have kind of those fiddly, finicky sort of BS problems where the window seals start leaking and the sunroof doesn't work anymore and all of the silly stuff goes wrong that you just don't need to deal with. The heater motor and the dash and the switches and just some of that stuff that you don't want to deal with and shouldn't have to deal with starts to go wrong. You're going to be spending a lot of time on that. So back to our kind of funnel, reasonable cost, relatively new, enough said. So we'll erase that and just put kind of new-ish as your second filter. Your third filter is that it should have reasonably good performance. It doesn't have to be a fast car, like a proper fast car, but you're gonna want it to be a kind of quick car. Just like picking a car in a video game, you're gonna want it to be fairly well balanced. Looking at performance, you wanna look at all-around vehicle performance, not just horsepower numbers or 0 to 60 numbers, though, acceleration obviously does have its place. How much does it weigh? What is its handling like? What are the brakes like? Does the thing rail around corners pretty well? It's pretty misleading, a lot of the kind of magazines and stuff, when you start looking at, 0 to 60 and 60 to 0 is fantastic. Some of the heavier, more muscle type cars here in America, you see a huge amount of them. They really don't go around corners very well at all. So try and pick something that the acceleration is about as good as the braking, is about as good as the handling, just like, in a video game or something like that. Some of the more funny cars to drive are way out of balance, massive horsepower and terrible handling or something like that. But in the real world, if you're driving this car to get training, to get better, to get the seat time that you need to get a really high level of performance behind the wheel, you need something that'll go, but it'll stop, it'll turn, it goes around corners. You don't have to worry about hitting bumps or suspension travel and some of that silly stuff. And really just take honest inventory of your skill level as a driver. If you can't drive the wheels off a Miata at the limit and show up at, some kind of an event and place fairly well, then you just need to spend some more time in lower horsepower cars. You're not burning as much gas, you're not wasting all the tires, it's going to be lower maintenance, and Miata might be the perfect answer for you. There are a lot of different little rear-wheel drive sports cars that you can choose from these days. You know, the Subaru BRZ, FRS, Toyota 86 section of the world. There are a ton of front-wheel drive cars that are simply fantastic for performance driving, and getting into the all-wheel drive is sort of driver's choice, whether you personally prefer rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive. Or maybe one is necessary to do the driving that you're looking for. If you want to go drifting, you're in a rear-wheel drive car. If you want to go rallying, starting front-wheel drive makes the most sense. If you live in Colorado and you just like ripping around in snowstorms, probably get an all-wheel drive. But as you're picking cars and looking at performance, just keep it reasonably quick, but something that's well balanced and that'll do everything you need it to do. And you'll find a lot of variety out there in that category. So that really narrows down the search already, but one other thing to definitely look into, if you've got a vehicle that you're kind of heart set on, or for whatever reason seems like it's the one, do your homework a little bit on the different years and the evolution of that vehicle as it's gone through. There can be a very big difference between '06 and an '08, which the car might look exactly the same, but hey, maybe the transmission's very different. Maybe it had some recalls on it. Maybe it had a head gasket. So just mechanically solid, I'm just gonna say solid here, proven platform, not known to have any major terminal issues. It sounds silly, but there are a lot of those vehicles out there. So just get on the internet and do your homework. The specific years of the model that you're looking at are going to be very different. Most of the vehicles that you've kind of funneled down to this point, somebody's out there racing them. Whether they're rallying it or they're out on the track with them, they're doing endurance racing, whatever it might be. Figure out what their most common failures are and just what's breaking down on folks on the street. Again, if you're really mechanically savvy and you really enjoy working on cars and you'd like to learn how to rebuild your engine, wonderful. But for the sake of just hard use driving, weed out any of those year, make, and models that are gonna be prone to failure. There are better options out there. Go for something reliable. So you've already weeded out most of the vehicles in the world. You know, you're in that parking lot of every car on the planet. There's only a handful that you're probably now really looking at hard. The next criteria that you're looking for in a vehicle is either the lack of or ability to disable those modern safety systems. If you're going to be taking this thing out and training, learning how to drive, you're going out on a track, you're driving in the wintertime, you're going to want to be able to shut off the traction control and the stability and the ABS and all of these kind of driver aids. They're not for you at this point anymore. So that's going to be a lot easier in some vehicles than others. It's going to take, again, a little bit of homework to be able to figure that out. You know, most cars, it's pretty easy to disable the left foot braking, kind of throttle cut switch, things like that. But if you're going to be doing any real hard driving with it and certainly training yourself as a driver, I'm just going to say analog, meaning you can get rid of all of that stuff that you don't want and get it down to just a proper car that you can do some real driving with. The next little filter on your list here is going to be to take a close look at the driveline and whether it's a front wheel drive, an all-wheel drive, or a rear wheel drive. Anything that's got a limited slip differential, an actual mechanical limited slip diff, or anything like that gets big bonus points. Sure, these are available as replacement kind of aftermarket items. You can get a normal vehicle and put a limited slip diff in it. Wonderful. But don't fall prey to a lot of these manufacturers that are using that, again, ABS and stability control systems to fake a limited slip diff. You'll see ELSD, auto LSD, a lot of this stuff. All that's going on is that's an open differential, and when one tire spins, that starts applying the brakes to that spinning tire in order to kick power, hopefully, to the other side. Most of the time it does work pretty well, but that's a subtractive process. You know, it's not spinning one tire and adding the other. It's spinning one tire, applying the brakes to that, and hoping that some power goes to the other side. If you do get out on the snow, on the gravel, or a real high performance scenario on the track where wheel spin is an issue for you, in corners as it gets a little light on one side or whatever might be going on, the only thing that's really going to work well, especially when you disable all the electronic nannies, is a solid mechanical limited slip diff. You can find these in front wheel drive cars and rear wheel drive cars. More of the sporty type of vehicles are going to have them. If you want to do your homework on, the difference between a Haldex and the different kinds of differentials and that kind of thing, that's great. You should definitely look into that. But just know that will make a huge difference when you are driving hard, and if you can get a vehicle that already has a limited slip in it, wonderful. As far as all-wheel drive cars, same rule applies. Take a close look at that center differential. What's controlling the power from the front to the rear wheels? A good, solid analog all-wheel drive system, viscous center differential is great. That's going to give you very solid and predictable all-wheel drive. Particularly in rallying or ice racing or any of that stuff, it's critically important. What you're going to see a lot of out there in the world and you're trying to avoid are the auto all-wheel drive systems where they're front-wheel drive cars until the front tires spin and then it engages some rear-wheel drive, or vice versa. You will see a lot of these automatic all-wheel drive systems that are labeled as just all-wheel drive, and it's gonna say, it's 40% front, 60% rear, until a wheel spins or something weird happens, or a wheel speed sensor senses something funny, or your steering angle sensor is giving it a different input. It's gonna be varying that power around on you however it wants to. You're not gonna have the ability to program that how you might actually want it to work. You're just going to be at the mercy of those computers. Again, this is going to be getting specifically into years, makes, and models, but a lot of the Volkswagen and Audi products, Volvos, BMWs, the xDrive stuff, the Minis, Land Rovers, Saab, Porsches, Hyundais. As these systems have evolved over the years, sure, some have gotten better than they were, 10 years ago or something like that. But if you want full control of your car right from the get-go, there's no reason to even play with those systems very much at all. There's a reason you don't see people rallying with them, and when they are used in racing, they're just replaced with proper kind of more solid all-wheel drive systems. So definitely running down the funnel here, you've weeded out the vast majority of vehicles that you might ever want to deal with. Again, if it's a two-wheel drive car, you can always buy a limited slip diff. It's usually about $1,000 and then the labor to install it, so that's not a super deal breaker, and you can do a lot with an open diff. But the next kind of screen you'd want to pass any potential vehicle through here, it's a pretty simple one. Does it have an actual handbrake? For a lot of manufacturers, gone are the days of an actual manual handbrake in the vehicle, where if you're driving that vehicle at the limit, a handbrake is a wonderful thing to have. One, for safety, having a cable operated brake that's going to your rear wheels. If you have some kind of massive failure, it's just a nice little security blanket to know that it's there. Two, practicality. You know that that cable handbrake is locked up and your vehicle's not moving. If you park it on a trailer, park it on a hill, park it wherever you want, you know it's there. It'll work when the car's on or off, or you can reach in and just do it. It doesn't matter. And three, there's a ton of reasons to use the handbrake while you're driving, particularly at high speeds on slippery roads. If you have any ambitions of doing any rallying or drifting or really driving quickly on snow and ice, it's pretty important to have a functioning handbrake. Again, if you've got a vehicle that meets all the other criteria but it happens to have the push button handbrake, you can always modify the car. You can add in a hydraulic handbrake or something like that. But just know that you're going to be like cutting plastic away and welding a bracket in and making stuff work and resale value and that kind of thing. If somebody sees a car with a hydraulic handbrake mounted in it, that's probably a good sign that that thing has seen a lot of hard miles. And the last little criteria that you're looking for when you're picking a vehicle to go out there and just go hot with is actual mileage. And even if you personally don't care about the environment and you just want to watch it all burn, you need a vehicle that's got some range. And really, there's no point here again in 2020 in having anything that gets less than 20 miles to the gallon unless you're making more than 400 horsepower. Horsepower and fuel mileage are no longer mutually exclusive. You can have 300 horsepower and get 30 miles to the gallon when you're just cruising around nice and easy. So if you've got something that only gets 10 or 15 miles to the gallon, unless you have 400 horsepower, that's just a grossly inefficient engine. And whatever your feelings might be on the planet and the environment and all of that stuff, there's no excuse anymore for just bad engineering. So that kind of sums it up. As you're looking at cars, something pretty affordable, that's newish, has good performance, is mechanically solid. You can disable all the nannies. It's got a solid driveline in it. The handbrake works and it gets decent fuel mileage and range. What are those cars gonna be? Number one, we want you guys in the comments section, light us up. Tell us what you think. What specific year, makes, and models are gonna be the best for this? What we personally use here at the Rally Driving School, where vehicles are abused every single day of the year almost for years and years at a time, our front wheel drive platform, Ford Fiesta. Solid little front wheel drive hatchback. They're rallied very successfully all around the world. Here in the States, they've taken the championship a whole bunch of times now in a row. If you've got a couple more bucks, the Fiesta ST is an absolute no-brainer. 200 horsepower, 6-speed transmission. It doesn't have a real limited slip differential, but there are a bunch of them that are available for that platform. We use them here at the Rally School. They're light, they're fast, they take a tremendous amount of abuse, and that's just specifically what we choose to run here. As far as a rear-wheel drive platform, a lot of the BMW stuff makes sense. If you've watched racing and drifting and all of that stuff, it was the E30s. Now they've gone up in price for decent ones and they're not really newish anymore. There's a lot of maintenance problems and your door seals are cracked and your windows don't work, crap you don't want to deal with. So getting into the E36s and now even the E46s and the more modern BMWs have done a really great job, and they're affordable in the used market to get into a rear-wheel drive with a limited slip. There's a bunch of the M3 variants out there that are great. The normal 3 Series, the 1 Series, the 135 stuff is awesome. Again, with the BMWs, be a little picky on your exact year, make, and model. Do your homework a little bit, because not all of them shake out, fully mechanically sound for real hard use over long periods of time. The other obvious rear-wheel drives, Miata. It doesn't work for us as a rally platform, unfortunately, because it's a soft top. Rally cars have to have a hard enclosed roof because they roll over so often. But if you're out there on the street, on the track, Miatas are excellent. Again, the Subaru BRZ, Scion FRS, Toyota 86 platform. But there are a ton of excellent rear-wheel drive vehicles that you can get that meet all of these criteria, and you can get a lot of really fun, hard driving miles out of them. As far as all-wheel drive, for us, it's gonna be a Subaru. And that's only here in America because that's what we've got. Do the Mitsubishi Evos fit in? Sure, but they're pretty rare here and pretty expensive and somewhat exotic to find parts for just because not many of them were imported. Something like a normal Subaru Impreza, the 2.5 liter, or the WRX, or of course the STI, can all be had within this price range depending on what your particular budget is. They've got handbrakes, a lot of them have limited slip diffs, the performance is definitely there, they're newish enough. It all just kind of shakes out that it makes the most sense here in America to go with the Subaru. Please, if you have any more specific year, makes, and models that you think meet all of these criteria, we want to hear about it, and we want a good kind of civil, hopefully, discussion in the comments section of this video. It really comes from a lot of different comments that we've had on a bunch of our performance driving videos, folks asking, hey, how do I do this if my handbrake doesn't work? Or how do I do this if I've got stability control? And the answer is, you don't. What you've got is probably a wonderful street car, and maybe you like the look of it and the interior and some of the options and the feel of daily driving that vehicle, but it's just not gonna be the hard use vehicle that you're looking for. If you're gonna do some training or put in some hard miles, another vehicle might be in your future. So thanks again for watching. We look forward to talking to you guys in the comments section. If you're interested in doing some driving yourself, the best performance vehicle is actually somebody else's. So come out to Team O'Neill, drive one of our cars, and you won't have to worry about what happens to it when you leave. If you're into these kinds of videos and more driving skills related stuff, please check out our YouTube channel and consider subscribing. And as always, have fun, be safe, and we'll catch you next time.